Good morning. Happy Father's Day. You know, select few. I mean, select. You guys are the best. Welcome to Immanuel United Church of Christ, Ferguson, Missouri. I'm Dr. Jimmy Watson. For those of you here and at home, senior pastor and wordsmith, part-time. Anyway, glad you're here. Today is the fourth Sunday after Pentecost. Today I want to talk to you about having open hearts, metaphorically speaking, of course. But what does that mean? And how do we get there? Having an open heart sounds like an easy thing to do, but I want to say that it is more difficult than calming the storm. We're going to hear about that in a few minutes. And understand maybe a few of us had a few good storms last night. So we have a few announcements today. The altar flowers are in loving memory of Laurel and Hazel Anderson, given by Ed and Jan Beeman. They're up here on the altar. So thank you to the Beeman family. And then the flowers over here are in loving memory of Paul K. Schmidt and George A. Hildebrand I, given by Paula and George. Their namesake. Thank you for that as well. Again, we have college scholarship forms that are available in the church office. So if you need one of those for a family member, please come by or let us know. Maybe we can send it electronically. I do have a sign-up sheet out here for readers, people to read Scripture, which of course we haven't had to use for a while. But we're trying to get back into the groove of doing sort of normal things. So if you have an inclination to do some reading for us during worship, please fill that out. It's only through July, so there will be more coming out later for that. And I need to announce that next Sunday, Linda Steckler will be here. And we will have a little get-together, a little reception for her down in the reception room. And there will be some snacks and things like that. So put that on your calendar if you want to say hi to Linda. Please be here next Sunday for that. And as I've noted here in your bulletin, in July, which is coming up pretty soon, we're going to be singing. Right? And then in August, we're going to add another step to that. We'll be doing communion, I think, in sort of the regular way, and also taking up the offering. So we're slowly creeping back into doing things in a quote-unquote normal way. If it gets a little warm in here today, it's because one of our AC units went out, and we're in the process of getting that repaired. But it'll take a while to order the parts and all that. So what I'm saying is do not go back there and think you're being helpful by turning on the ACs to a more comfortable position, because it won't work. I see some of you doing this already. So you may be doing more of that after, my sermon's about an hour and a half long today. So you'll be doing more of that. So at this time, I'm going to invite Charlie Wolfersberger, our council president. He's got a couple things to talk to you about.
Good morning, everybody. A couple things this morning. One, we've made a change in the church office. So Dana Nolan works with us at Immanuel. She was here about 3 years, worked during the pandemic. So I want to publicly thank her for all the things she did for us. So we will have other people answering the phone. It might be Jimmy, it might be Andy, it might be my wife, Debbie. She's going to come in a few days. And if nobody answers the phone, we do have an answering machine, so we will get back to you. So don't be afraid to leave a message. The position's open and we will refill it. Okay, second thing, the membership task force. We're going to have another meeting about that. The results are in. I brought some paper copies. They're at the back of the church. If you don't have email, they were sent out an email about a week ago. I'll bring some more paper copies next week. But what we'd like to do a week from today, in the evening, 7 p.m. Sunday night, is I'd like to hear your reaction. to the task force. So we've got these things scored, and we'll be looking at them. I'd be interested to hear what you think about it. You know, we'll be talking about the top 10 or 12 and think that those might be things we could do something about. And I think the last 3 or 4 are kind of interesting too. So anyway, I'd like to hear your reactions about it. Please call in for a Zoom meeting next Sunday night. Thank you.
Join with me responsibly in the call to worship, followed by our prayer of invocation. It is awesome when all of the people live together in unity. When waters run, we hold each other tightly. When the sea begins to swallow us, we hold each other tightly and call on God. But we also need God and each other when there are no looming waves. We can splash and play in the shallow end and venture into deeper waters with trusted friends, delighting in refreshing currents of community and savoring each burst of laughter. Let's invite others to join in the fun. And join with me, please. Ever-living God, you are like the sea, powerful and endless, yet soothing and constant. Let us feel your refreshing presence as we gather near your waters to weigh the possibilities of life that you offer us this day. Please be seated. You can follow along with the reading in the last page of your bulletin. I've got some positive feedback, at least on the larger print in the bulletins. Are some of you happy with that? Those of you over 40, right? Our first reading is from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. As we work together with him, we urge you also not to accept the grace of God in in vain. For he says, "At an acceptable time I have listened to you, and on a day of salvation I have helped you." See, now is the acceptable time. See, now is the day of salvation. We are putting no obstacle in anyone's way, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. But as servants of God, we have commended ourselves in every way, through great endurance, in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights, hunger. By purity, knowledge, patience, kindness, holiness of spirit, genuine love, truthful speech, and the power of God, with the weapons of righteousness for the right hand and for the left, in honor and dishonor, in ill repute and good repute. We are treated as impostors and yet are true, as unknown and yet we are well known, as dying and see we are alive, as punished and yet not killed, as sorrowful yet always rejoicing, as poor yet making many rich, as having nothing and yet possessing everything. We have spoken frankly to you, Corinthians. Our heart is wide open to you. There is no restriction in our affections, but only in yours. In return, I speak as to children. Open wide your hearts also. Way to have an open heart is to sort of clear out that which is weighing us down. So with that in mind, let us join together in our prayer of confession. O God, forgive us for our two-sided nature. We face the powerful with righteous anger, but clinging to any sense of power that we attain. We are grateful when grace is extended to us, yet remain absent-minded of this when others have wronged us. We treat our own as family, yet ignore siblings whom we see only from a distance. As people of paradox, we long for oneness with ourselves and others, with Christ in creation, so that justice and love may flow freely. God's grace washes upon the turbulent shores of our lives, and we are forgiven to begin again to live at peace with ourselves and others, with Christ and creation, allowing justice and love to flow freely through our lives. Well, what I'm going to ask you to do now is to offer each other, one another, a socially distanced, remaining in your pews sign of Christ's peace by turning to your neighbors and greeting them with a smile, a wave, or a nod. It's good to see the Heenan clan with us today. Yeah. Thanks for being here. And Shannon, how are you?
Hi.
I'm glad you're here too with your sister.
Yes.
Thanks for coming. All right. So our next reading is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, and this is the story we've been sort of referencing all throughout our service, which is where Jesus calms the storm. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" the other end at home? Can you tell? Who knows? Okay. Maybe it might just be one person, but I don't know. Hopefully it'll come back on. We're going to talk about denominational mottos for a moment. Do you have any favorites? Any favorite mottos? Of course, there is the United Church of Christ mottos. There are several, such as that they may all be one. That was sort of the original. God is still speaking, kind of a newer one. And there's one a lot of churches use, which is no matter where you are, or no matter who you are, or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And then the newest one is called, says, a just world for all. This inspired one UCC minister to say that maybe our next motto should be, we collect mottos. I think our next motto should be, less mottos, more motion. That's just me. Now, I put the word out on social media asking for people to share with me some of their denominational mottos, and I got some that were sort of humorous, such as this one for the disciples of Christ. We agree to disagree agreeably. It's very inspiring. And the Presbyterians are known for the motto, decently and in order. Maybe not the most inspiring motto ever, but at least you know your children will be safe, right? And then someone suggested, and I can say this because I grew up Southern Baptist, but they suggested sort of a reimagining of the Southern Baptist Convention's abbreviation, SBC. So they said SBC still belongs to the Confederacy. People back home now, I'm going to get some phone calls on that one. Seriously, one of my favorite mottos belongs to the United Methodists. It says, open hearts, open minds, open doors. And open doors, so is the last one. So welcoming is sort of the hope for end result of that motto. I mean, everybody wants to be seen as a welcoming church, right? Everyone. The UCC talks about extravagant welcome and extravagant hospitality and things like that. But the question is, how do you get there? How does a church or denomination become an institution with doors that are truly open, and not just part of a slogan, but they really are open? I was reminded of the Methodist motto while reading Paul's words in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 for this week. I want you to listen again to verses 11 through 12, at the end of that reading. Paul said, we have spoken frankly to you, Corinthians. Our heart is wide open to you. There is no restriction in our affections, but only in yours. In return, I speak as to children. Open wide your hearts also. So open hearts, open minds, and open doors. And obviously, the Methodists believe that we do not get to the open doors without first having open hearts and open minds, in that order. And I can understand why they see it that way. It makes logical sense. If our hearts and our minds are open, then we are more likely to have doors that will swing wide open, right? Makes sense. But I've been accused on more than one occasion of being a backwards thinker. And so I want to reverse the order of the Methodist motto so that it says, open doors, open minds, open hearts. Now, why do I want to reverse that and start with open doors? Well, for starters, opening our doors is the easiest of the three. It really is. Whether our hearts are into it or not, whether we are truly open-minded, so to speak, about certain groups of people inhabiting our pews, we can walk back there and physically open our doors and open them up, and we can advertise that our church welcomes everyone and so forth. We can do that. We can have an open door policy without really breaking a sweat. It's easy. We can practice the open table for communion as we do in the United Church of Christ, even if deep down we think, well, maybe some people don't really belong there. We can officially become, as the UCC says, open and affirming, even if very few of our people participate in pride parades or wear rainbow socks or anything like that. We can create an alliance with African American congregations in North County, as we have done, even though many of us have never even worshiped in a black church. We can do these things without a whole lot of trouble. We can have the sort of open door policy without investing a lot of emotional or intellectual energy, without even having open hearts and minds in the first place. And you know what? That's okay. That's a good first step. Because sometimes doing something, whether our hearts or minds are into it or not, can lead to a change in our hearts and minds, just by doing it. I learned that from Aristotle. Not that me and Aristotle grew up together. We're good friends. But I learned that from him. He said, virtues are formed in humanity by doing the right actions. Virtues, we become virtuous people by doing the right thing. And then later on, echoing Aristotle, in fact, many people thought Aristotle said this, but he didn't. It was the American historian and philosopher Will Durant who said that we are what we repeatedly do. We are what we repeatedly do. Maybe this is where we get that phrase, we are what we eat. I don't know. But therefore, if we get in the habit of opening our doors and being a welcoming church, then this becomes who we are. It becomes second nature. It will then inhabit our thoughts and our actions if we just do it. So, working backwards from the Methodist motto, the next step after we open our doors, because that's kind of easy, is to have an open mind. Have an open mind. What does that mean? What is that? We hear that all the time. You just need to have an open mind. Well, what exactly does that mean? Well, surely it has something to do with being willing to listen and to learn things. It has to do with being willing to, obviously, to change our minds if the need arises. So, an open mind is a malleable mind. It's something you can help form into a better thing. Now, most of us, I think, probably believe that we have an open mind. I mean, don't you sit and go, oh, I've got an open mind. I mean, that's how I see myself. Yeah, I'm open-minded. I come out of West Texas, but I'm open-minded. But there's plenty of evidence to suggest that a mind that is truly open is rare. In fact, if our minds were like animal species, we would call the open mind an endangered species. When you think about it, we talked about Aristotle, now let's pay attention to Socrates, who said, examine yourself. Let's do that. How many of you have ever changed your minds about anything of significance? I'll give you a moment. You go home and think about it. When's the last time that you did that? If you, after you thought about it a while, if you care to send me an email this week telling me how you change your mind about something that's really important and significant. I honestly would like to hear about that. I would like to know about your journey, how you went from A to B on that. That would be fascinating for me. Now, rather than share with you something about which I changed my mind, let me share with you about the time I helped a couple of other people change their minds. This happened when I was the pastor at St. Andrew United Church of Christ in Louisville, Kentucky. We were going through what I mentioned earlier, the open and affirming process, something we've talked about doing here. We might do it in the future. And one of the topics that we were stuck on one day was about whether one's orientation is a choice that people make, or it's an orientation, let's say, something more natural. And most people in our congregation in Louisville by then had concluded that it's not a choice, at least it's not only a choice. But there were a few holdouts, of course, who were hanging on to that assumption. It's what they'd always heard, and they couldn't let go. And we were not argumentative about this. It was a good discussion. But without any strategic forethought whatsoever, I just sort of blurted out, so, tell me, if you're straight, when did you decide to become straight? When did you make that choice? And for a few minutes, or moments, I could only hear crickets. The cicadas were not alive, and they were not up around at that moment. I mean, it was dead silence. A few weeks later, that congregation voted to become open and affirming. And after the vote, two older gentlemen came up to me and told me that my question to them, to the group, when did you decide to become straight, helped them to change their minds about the topic. And realize that, no, people don't just wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to be gay today. It just doesn't work that way, right? So open minds, open minds. Ironically, the United Methodists are now experiencing a fractured denomination because, unfortunately, let's be real, having an open mind does not always mean being of the same mind. It's one thing to be open, but it's another thing for everybody to be on the same page. So opening a mind is sometimes like trying to open a locked door without a key. It's not that easy for anyone. And yet, even that is not as difficult as having an open heart. This is tough. As I said earlier, this might be more difficult than calming a storm. Opening our hearts occurs at a much deeper level than opening our minds or opening a door, because it gets to who we really are. Who we really are. So we might be able to hide who we really are by, behind opening a door, hide behind the open door. We can maybe hide behind engaging in an intellectual conversation about something important. We can do that sort of thing, and we convince people and others that, hey, we're virtuous people. We have good values. We follow Christ. We love God. We love one another. Because on the surface, that's what it looks like when we go and open our doors, or when we open minds and we're willing to talk about things. It looks like we're good people. We're virtuous people. But opening our hearts is the most difficult of all of the three. Which is why I think the Methodists should reverse the order of their motto and end with open hearts. Getting back to those two older gentlemen in Louisville, they opened their minds. They let in new information, and good for them. I applaud that. It's great. But I wonder if their hearts really, truly, genuinely, honestly, and sincerely ever opened to the what I like to call the rainbow community. I have no idea. And I don't mean to judge, but I know that changing one's heart is a big deal. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because we were intellectually challenged by a question. It doesn't happen. Several years ago, many of you were challenged here in Ferguson, where an event occurred that made a lot of people think about their open door policy, made a lot of people maybe try to open their minds a little wider. But the question is, did their hearts follow suit? That is, have we really, truly, genuinely, honestly, and sincerely opened our hearts to the plight of people of color, not only in this community, but everywhere? You know, yesterday was Juneteenth, and that was a holiday that we look at that, and some of us go, okay, well, I need to have a more open mind about things. It just sort of reminded us to do that. But what about our hearts? So are we hiding behind our deepest feelings, behind open doors? Are we hiding behind welcoming mottos? Are we hiding behind joining a group of churches that are committed to racial harmony in North County? Are we hiding behind intellectual endeavors such as our Monday night book study, which is focused right now on a book about racial issues in America? Again, opening our doors and our minds is one thing, but opening our hearts is something much, much more difficult to do. And again, maybe it's more difficult than calming a storm. So as I reflect on my reversed Methodist motto, open doors, open minds, open hearts, I want to go back to the Apostle Paul's words to the church at Corinth. Paul felt the need to speak frankly to them. To speak to them as, he says, children, as condescending as that sounds. He says that his heart is wide open to them, and then he encourages them to open their hearts wide also. But there's another phrase he uses in that passage, one that I want to emphasize as I conclude this sermon. Paul claims that there is no restriction in our affections. There is no restriction in our affections. Wow. I think we just found our next motto. Amen. For prayer concerns today, I want to lift up Louise Pinnell. Louise had a lot of trouble physically and otherwise. So if you know Louise, you know her plight, be sure to lift her up this morning. And also, we did hear that Maureen Hatch's sister, and I didn't get the correct spelling of the name because it's kind of different, but does anybody remember her name? You could say it very loudly for everyone to hear. She used to come here and be a member here, but she passed away this past week. And information on that. Anybody? Okay. I'll get that information and get it to you. I think she was a member here a long time ago. It's kind of interesting. I've done a couple of little graveside funerals, and more to come. People who grew up in this church, who were here years ago and went off, and then they died during the COVID era. And so now their families are wanting to bring them back. It's all kind of hit at one time. And the same with people that are members of our church. Marilyn Prater, she died early on in the COVID era. And the family's having a celebration of her life this weekend, just for family and really close friends. But I wanted you to be aware that they are doing something for her. Let us pray. Eternal God, we are almost embarrassed to present our prayers to you some days. We realize that when things go well, we do not even think about praying. We seem to think of you only in times of trouble and peril. In our prayers, we so often come to you when the storms of life rage and we feel threatened and vulnerable. Many times we carry these things inside of us, the protests and the lament of the psalmist are familiar to us, and we wonder, how long will this storm persist? We try to have faith, but the demons of fear and worry frequently overcome us. In such times when the waves of life roll high, we ask that you would speak to us again your gentle word of peace. Build us up with Jesus' words where he said, do not fear. Just believe, don't fear. Bring us your peace when we are upset and in turmoil because of the senseless chaos which continually rages in our world. Bring us your peace when we feel vulnerable, when our health is threatened, and when we become frightened and we worry about how many tomorrows remain for us. Bring us your peace when the darker shadow of our inner selves seems too strong and we are overwhelmed and too frightened to acknowledge it and integrate it into our being. So bring us your peace when we're worried about tomorrow, when we worry about whether our money will last as long as we live or how we will make financial ends meet. Bring us your peace, O Lord, and quiet our inner storms. Help us to trust. Pray that in the name of the one who did calm the storm and who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Gifts to each one of us. Teach us to celebrate and share those gifts so that we may create communities of graciousness and love. Through Jesus, we are reminded of the difference that an individual contribution can make. So let us offer our gifts generously for the service of all. Please join with me in our prayer of thanksgiving. Big-hearted God, we ask you to take these gifts, bless them, and use them to calm storms and create in our communities new, imaginative, and life-giving streams. Amen. So we are the waters in which God swims. Try to think about that image for a moment. We are the waters in which God swims, and vice versa. But through the currents, the crashing waves, and depths of the unknown, a holy presence always remains. May God continue charting new courses and ways of being in the world that unites creation in a collective call of peace, be still.